So one of the things when it gets to this curriculum, when we have seventh graders coming to us, and we're looking at now talking about African Americans, I mean, this does say something because throughout seventh grade, since African Americans started arriving in the colonies and in the states as slaves, they were always slaves, property. So
there were some free in the North.
Right.
There are some free African Americans in the North, but for the most part, yes.
But there's not a lot of those good stories. There's not a lot of those great stories.
For the main majority of African Americans in America before 1865, they were slaves.
So, I mean, and even when we're in the classroom, wrapping your head around freedmen now, or African, it's one of those things moving forward, it's tough to, because if you had a seventh grade curriculum that went from, the Native Americans up to the Civil War, if you're talking about African Americans, they're property. So that's going to be part of this huge transition going in. So first things first, if we're going to, address these wrongs or have them become a part of the population, we need to add amendments.
Yeah, because let's not forget, the Constitution as it was written allowed slavery. The 3/5 Compromise basically said 3 out of every 5 other persons. They actually don't even mention the word slavery. Other persons will count in a state's population towards taxation and representation. So it was literally allowed when the Constitution was written in 1787. So if it's allowed in the Constitution, we have to change the Constitution to make sure it is no longer going to be allowed ever.
Now, if you know that the first 3 letters of the alphabet are A, B, C, then you'll be able to remember the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. Because when we're looking at the 13th Amendment, let's go back here. The first things first, when you're looking at now slaves, you now have to come up with something that's going to do away with that language that ends slavery altogether.
Once and for all.
Once and for all.
Hopefully.
So even though the 13th Amendment is going to be worded differently and the 14th and 15th are going to be worded differently, when you look at the Constitution, we've made it easier to read. We've made it like a Barney-style version of this. This way, you know that the 13th Amendment's going to abolish slavery. The 14th Amendment's going to say if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen, and the 15th one is going to be citizens' right to vote. We're going to make it much, much easier for you to remember. So when you come across that document, you encounter that language, it's going to be easier for you to pick it out. Also, sometimes these things do appear on tests. Mm-hmm. So first things first, slavery is not going to be abolished.
Now, going with Mr. Heek said, yes, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. But, and I want to get into this because we have to have a firm understanding of this as we move throughout Reconstruction. The actual wording of the 13th Amendment is something along the lines of slavery nor involuntary servitude, comma, except where the party shall have been duly convicted of a crime, comma, shall exist within the United States or anywhere within its jurisdiction.
Sure.
That comma, that except where the party shall have been duly convicted of a crime, is really, really important. Because it's basically saying slavery cannot exist unless you are a convicted criminal. Because convicted criminals today are basically slaves. Yeah. They've lost their freedom, and they can be forced to do work and not get paid.
And that's the other thing, too. When you're looking at legal documents, there's so much that you have to consider. And even, not that you're thinking about the future, but you kind of are. You're trying to put out a statement that's going to cover a lot of things. Mm-hmm. 14th Amendment, if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen.
Again, here, this is huge. Because now it was like, all right, slaves, you are now free. Okay, what does that mean? Not only are you free, if you were born here in the United States, you are now a citizen of the country of the United States. And what's also really important about the 14th Amendment, 14th Amendment is probably, I don't want to say the most important amendment, but it's certainly one of the most important amendments of the entire Constitution, because it also then allows for equal protection under the law. Right. Due process for all citizens. And that's key. Equal protection under the law. No matter who you are, no matter what you look like, no matter how much money you have, no matter what religion you are, no matter anything, every American citizen is entitled to equal protection under the law. And it's actually the 14th Amendment, getting a little bit off topic here, it's the 14th Amendment that is used in an argument before the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court has upheld gay marriage throughout our country. Right. Basically saying, yes, you can marry whoever you want because you are entitled to equal protection under the law. And then that gets into a whole Like the kids are like, well, how is that important? Why? Because marriage is actually a legal union of two people.
Yes.
You know, it's not just like go to church and like you're married. It's an actual legal union, and you have certain legal protections as a married couple. And then finally, the 15th Amendment, really, really important. If you are a citizen of the United States, you have the right to vote, except if you're a woman.
I was just going to say, ladies, pay attention here because you're not included.
Because at this time, the women's suffrage movement, which we're going to get into it's already begun.
1848.
Yeah, it's already begun. People like Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they're alive and they're fighting for the women's right to vote, and they look at the 15th Amendment as a major defeat for them.
Absolutely. Because
they're like, all right, African American men now have the right to vote. That's only going to put us on the back burner for that much longer. In fact, another 50 years almost.
Right.
More than 50 years.
Yeah.
So A, slavery is abolished. B, if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen of the United States. C, citizens have the right to vote, cannot deny them the right to vote.
Age is still 21 here.
Yes, at the time.
18-1 doesn't come until years later. So here are your new amendments, rules, or laws, however the case may be. So now, if you're an African American now, you're no longer a slave, you're no longer property or a slave, you're now a person who can now be in society. However, when you look at these slaves who, when you look at these freedmen who were once slaves, freedom, great. I can vote, awesome. But what do these people want? They want their own home, they want their own money, they want jobs. And the thing is that you're now starting off your life where, you could be in your 30s or 40s and now you're free. And what do you have? Your skills are...
You have the clothes on your back.
Right.
You have the minimal amount of skills that you've learned from your plantation. In most cases, the ability to pick a crop and grow a crop.
Right.
Very few were entrusted with carpentry skills or whatnot. But yeah, and let's not forget that for more than a century, there were laws on the books called the slave codes, which basically said it was illegal to educate your slave. Mainly in part because they didn't want slaves being able to have the cognitive ability to form a rebellion. They said if we keep them ignorant, if we keep them uneducated, they'll do what they're told.
And unarmed.
Yeah.
So, this is great, but it's like, okay, now what?
Now we got to help them.
And, what are some things that they're going to need then? They're going to need
food, jobs,
shelter, jobs.
They're going to need an education.
Because
without an education, you'll never be able to help yourself.
Right, exactly.
If I can't read and be able to apply for a job, if I can't be able to read and...
If I give you a fish, I can feed you for a day, but if I teach you to fish, Look,
feed me for a lifetime. What a great guy.
I think I've read him the Snapple Cap. Snapple Cap. A lot of interesting information. So, when we look here, this is what they come up with. The Freedmen's Bureau. This is going to be a government agency to help former slaves and poor whites, because poor whites are going to fall into that as well. But the goal is for African Americans now. This was established by Lincoln, so again, great idea. You have Lincoln's name now associated with a government program, so that does help out. It's going to give food and clothing to former slaves. It's going to help freedmen to find jobs and provide medical care.
Build schools.
Build schools. Creates colleges. Some of these still in existence today, and they were predominantly African American when they began. Howard, Morehouse, Fisk. The schooling part, the education part, we gave it 2 bullets because that education piece, as Mr. Kogan brought up, is very, very important. So a very, very good agency. However. Okay.
When we look at any government agency, if we go back for a second.
Yeah, let's go back.
If we're going to build schools, if we're going to provide medical care, if we're going to give food and clothing to former slaves, that all sounds good and great, and it is good and great. And I always ask my students, however, what could potentially be a negative effect of that? Not even a negative effect, but a better way of asking it is why would people be against this? Well, if I'm a white northerner, and I already have an education, I already have these things. Heck, even if I was a free African American with all these things, that's going to take money out of my pocket.
Right.
And especially those poor white Southern farmers, as you said before, they're struggling.
Yep.
And it's like, wait a minute, I need help.
Yeah.
Those rich plantation owners have been, making millions upon millions, billions of dollars in today's money off of the work of these slaves, and I can barely put food on my table. And now you're going to go and help these former slaves? What about me?
Right.
What about me? I mean, it did include the poor whites, but still, it's like I need an education.
Right.
I need medical care. I need all of these things.
I'm a citizen as well.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of questions that come up throughout history, and the answers to it usually kind of start off with, it's kind of complicated. So you'll probably hear us say that a lot.
Yeah, history's not cut and dry.
It's really
It's
not.
It's so not.
So then we have this.
All right, I see. Well, this is a big man with a big head.
Big man, big head.
Assuming it's Andrew Johnson.
Sure.
And he appears to be kicking a side table.
I see the word veto.
Yeah.
Right.
And it says Freedmen on that. Oh, it's almost like a bureau. The bureau is also like a...
Right. Well, 7th and
Side
8th graders,
table.
they don't
Yeah.
go, okay, it's either a side table, a dresser.
nightstand.
Eventually, you might have one that gets stuck going antiquing with mom that
Yeah.
goes, oh, bureau, that's like a dresser. So hopefully you're putting two and two together, Freedmen's Bureau together, and they're being kicked. Now, this may not come out that clear, but I'm also looking at black stick figures that are coming out of this. And they're now here.
I would say something like this doesn't look good for Andrew Johnson,
Right.
especially if you're somebody who believes in equality and helping these former freedmen.
No, all those wonderful things we just mentioned about the Freedmen's Bureau, he's now kicking. Now, what can now, did he actually kick the Freedmen's Bureau physically?
No.
No, so get that cartoon image out of your head.
But when the funding bill comes to his desk, because once again, these programs needed money, and they need to be re-upped every year. Once it passes Congress that we're going to fund the Freedmen's Bureau for another year, comes to his desk, he refuses to sign it. He issues a presidential veto on that bill.
So Johnson does veto the Freedmen's Bureau. Now, of course, it's just a bill. It's on Capitol Hill. When the president vetoes it, it then goes back.
There is still a process for it to become a law, the overturning of a presidential veto.
Should we cover this separately?
No, let's do it now.
All right. And this is kind of like, I'll read it. Where are my eyes? Where are my eyes? Okay, here we go. Let me get my eyes out. All right, so we have the Freedmen's Bureau. So just looking at this, if we put it on there and you looked at it for 5 seconds while I was looking for my glasses, you probably went, whoa, what is up with this? Okay, so before we even start to read all of this, because I know there's some words that pop out at you, some caricatures, you wouldn't draw anybody like this today. This is absolutely racist. You wouldn't use these type of words that are popping out there. But the thing is that when we're looking back at history, it's not pretty. We don't write the story. We help you to kind of look at these documents and learn about the story this way. But this is definitely not pretty. This is definitely offensive, racist, absolutely.
And when we look at political cartoons this entire year,
Yes.
you're going to see less than human-like characteristics used to describe African Americans, Chinese, Japanese,
Yes.
Irish, any of the immigrant groups,
Anybody.
the Filipinos, the Cubans, the Puerto Ricans,
Native Americans.
Yes, I mean you're going to see less than human characteristics. And I ask my students, like, what less than human characteristic do you see to describe the freedmen here? And 99 times out of 100, they say it looks like a monkey.
Yeah.
And the artist of this cartoon designed it on purpose that way to make the freedman look like a monkey. So automatically, if we're thinking like historians now, we now start to get into the perspective of the artist of this particular cartoon or advertisement. Are they going to be for or against helping the freedmen? And this alone should jump out at you and smack you in the face and be like, this person doesn't like the freedmen.
Right. And even today, I mean, how can I possibly word this? In 2020, even if you were trying to make a point or whatever, you wouldn't do this here, because this is just going to invite all sorts of, it brings up a bad time. In 2020, you wouldn't put this out there other than to discuss how horrible things were in the past. This is not something that would be used for comedy, satire, you name it. So
I would also ask my students,
Yeah.
Where would we see this advertisement? Where would we see this political cartoon? Are we going to see this political cartoon in a New York City newspaper, in a Boston newspaper, or somewhere down south? We're going to see it somewhere down south. after the Civil War is over, during Reconstruction, and we'll get into reading it.
Yeah, so I'll read it for you here. So we have the Freedmen's Bureau, an agency to keep the Negro in idleness at the expense of the white man. Twice vetoed by the president and made a law by Congress. Support Congress and you support the Negro. Sustain the president and you protect the white man.
All right. Now, this
And
almost
let's see, in the
seems...
sweat of thy, Freedmen's Bureau. Okay.
This almost seems that, like, the word that comes to mind is, like, although we haven't talked about it yet,
Mhm.
but I would almost see this being discussed at a meeting of the members of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
You know?
That's an argument for trying to.
Yeah.
That's definitely an argument for not supporting any policy that's going to help out African Americans. Sure.
You know, it says here, freedom and no work.
Right.
You know, that Negro troops are given $300 a year.
Right. So now you're taking
pension.
statistics and you're
You know,
trying
white
to
veterans
justify.
are only given $100.
Yep.
You know, Freedmen's Bureau cost the taxpayers $25 million. I forget what it says here. The white man must work to keep his children and pay
His taxes. Taxes.
his taxes.
Right.
You know, so, and here you see, you know, a white farmer, a white lumberjack, whatever, you know, working their butt off while the freedman is kind of just sitting there being taken care of by the government. This particular cartoon is very, very powerful in the South. If you look at this, and I said before, you're one of these poor white farmers, you're going to be really upset. You're going to start to, dare I say, not like
Yeah.
the freedmen. You know, there's an we talk about author's purpose in the LA. There's a purpose why this cartoon is drawn this way, and the words were carefully chosen, because it's like they don't do anything, and they're being taken care of by the government while you, the white farmer, are working your butt off and struggling.
And the government's not taking care of you.
Yeah.
I mean, because look, let's put it this way, right? He vetoed it, and it already twice, and Congress supported it. So the Congress or the government is not helping these guys out. Just now.
So that
Yeah.
unity that we wanted after
Very, very difficult
after the
to
Civil
achieve
War
here, yeah.
doesn't seem to be achieved, having been achieved yet.
I thought there was something else on here I saw. I mean, you can go on and on with this. I think that was pretty much it, right? We have author's purpose in here,
Historical
defensive
thinking.
and historical thinking. All right, got to go through your mental checklist. I mean, it's not like we write this stuff
I know.
down.